Very busy colleagues here present. But let's start with the roundtable discussion now, right away. So we have a 50-minute roundtable discussion ahead of us about safety in the alternative protection system. This actually is about children who do not live in their biological families, but in some kind of institutional frame. And we are going to talk about this protective system. So either these children are in foster families, or in some special children's homes, residential homes, and they can meet their parents only in the ordinary frequency regulated by the guardianship authorities. Now, the question can be asked, how many children are affected in Hungary today? According to data of the Central Statistic Office, in 2021, around 20,000 children. So this means about 12,300 underage children. This is 0.03% of all the minors. So actually, it's why do we deal with this topic? Because it's not such a high number in a conference dealing with child protection, because this 0.03% means a trend showing upwards. So that means 12.3 children from 1,000 children are affected by this kind of protection system. But the real reason why we are dealing with this topic, because they are the most vulnerable of the children, so who cannot count on protection provided by their own families. But still, actually, during the many years, the most traditional form of upbringing children is in families. But these children are members of this institutionalized system, even if this institution is a foster family. Who are my partners at this discussion? So they are all experts of this protection system. They are all involved in it. Let me introduce them to you. Dr. Éva Both, Deputy Director of the National Child Protection Authority. Dr. Krisztina Novák, leader of the Right Protection Commission and Integrated Right Protection Service. János Kothencz, Integrated Child Protection Service, and Dr. Erzsébet Kovács Gulyásné, lecturer at the Sapientia College of Theology of Religious Orders. And for many years, she was head of the respective department. And I myself, my name is László Csókay, I'm lecturer at the Sapientia College of Theology of Religious Orders. I would like to ask you to give us a short summary of why do we have to talk about the situation of children, this protection system, their situation around their safety. First, I would like to ask you, Erzsébet, why is it necessary to deal with this group as such on its own? As it has been said several times today, I believe that it is one of the most important rights of children is to be brought up in his or her biological family. And it is the huge responsibility of the state that for those children for whom this is not possible, for them to give another kind of protection. According to the 20th article of the CRC, it says that these children who are brought up outside their families, they are entitled to the protection of the state, And so the state has a responsibility in respect. Either they should be brought up in a foster family or in another institution. The Hungarian Child Act from it came into effect in 1997. Besides listing up many rights of children, there is a special article on protection. So what the reasons are listed, the rights for such protection. I would like to focus on three of these, and I hope that through these I will be able to show you why we have to deal with the rights of these children on their own, and mainly why the emotional safety, security is so important for them. Of course, physical security too, so protection from any kind of abuse also. But in the case of these children, emotional safety is to be highlighted. One of these rights is that the law says that such children have the right for adequate provision, adequate to their needs, and this provision should provide for them emotional security, emotional safety. Why is this important? All these children are injured in some kind of sense, either through neglect or abuse or death or severe illness happened in their families, or their own behavior caused that they became part of the system. So for these children, it is of utmost importance that if they are removed from their biological families, they get into an environment where they still can experience emotional safety. First and foremost, you have to define and determine what is their emotional safety. So in order to be able to find the right provision for them, first their status, their condition has to be diagnosed, their physical, psychological condition. And if this could be determined, then the next task is to find the right place for caring for these children. In this connection, in this regards, also to talk about potential threats, what can be a problem in providing an adequate provision for these children. Well, on the one hand, if their situation, if their condition could not be mapped out right, then their needs can't be defined well. Another threat can also be if there is no right place for them that could provide adequate provision for them. And also emotional safety, security can also be threatened by the fluctuation of experts. So if not the right expert, if not the right helper, professional was selected for that specific child, or if none of those experts are available. And unfortunately, there is also a huge fluctuation in the whole social domain. A further right of such children is that they have the right to adequate legal representation. Why is this important? In Hungary, the legal representation of children is carried out not by the parents, but by so-called legal guardians. Now, in an average family, the parents act according to the interests of their children, and this is the same in the child protection system. However, there can be conflicts of interest, interest of authorities or employers' interests. Uh, for example, how child care institution is structured, and it can also be a serious problem that if this legal guardian is overloaded, so has to deal with more children than he can cope with, or if there is a huge geographical distance between the individual children and which hinders the build-up of a good relationship between this legal guardian and the children, that's a problem. So it is of utmost importance that there should be a person who is really the representative of the rights of the specific children. And a third right is the right to for the support in order to getting back into the biological family, and the right to keep in touch with the family. So in case of each and every child who where there is no conflict of interest, from the starting from the removal from the family, it should be a target that after a certain time the child can get back into his or her biological family. So just a minimum amount of time should be spent in this institutional way.
But in order to be able, for the child to be able to return to the family, they have to keep contact. But it has to be, of course, regulated by the authorities in such a way that the parent will be able to satisfy all of the criteria that, for example, the child is in a suitable distance, and that the parent can visit the child as regularly as possible, but at the same time will be able to, let's say, work. And also, it is also important that the parent needs to cooperate with the location where the child is placed. So all this is a prerequisite for the child to return to the family. And of course, in this whole process, the parents must be considered as partners, and we need to cooperate with them. I do apologize. Probably I talked too long. I promise I'm not going to say anything anymore. But it was just so important to say all this. As also, as is mentioned, so the children in the state care, they are subject to so many decisions, basically a series of decisions that have a huge impact on their life, and they are very, very important decisions. And the territorial child protection authorities obviously make these decisions, or at least prepare the decisions from the organization and professional point of view. Eva is works for the National Child Protection Authority. So what's your perspective on this issue? Yes, it works, right. So our authority is basically has already been described by Lotzi, and as she basically described the major task we have. So children who cannot live with their family, and the Convention on Right of the Child says that children who were deprived of their right to live with their families, well, they need to be provided a service according to our law, and the territorial child protection services provide this service. About 18 months ago, we became a so-called integrated institution. So anything that is to do with children's rights that have already been beautifully described before, which is the assessment, the placement, and all these aspects, well, they are provided, but additional services are now provided. I would like to emphasize those because I believe that they clearly point out what we believe our approach should be, and what sort of rights we want to ensure to the children, and how we can make sure that they can develop also outside their families. And we call it a new generation service provision. We have crisis services and therapies. And the major idea here is, actually, we talked about it today, but the major point here is that you need to observe and look at the situation from various perspectives and by various professionals to try to identify the needs of the children, how we can provide safety to these children. So all these services aim at trying to identify it and provide these services. And of course, you can oversimplify it to say that it is about protection, taking care of the child, and provision, but so these are the major pillars. However, when it comes to caring for the children, I think that is János's expertise. But now I would like to talk about a very important aspect, namely participation. So participation is a very important principle in our work. The state is always trying to do the best for the children who cannot live with their families, and it is basically a legal parenthood that the child protection guardian is representing. And now I'd like to refer to our General Director, István Erdei, who at the establishment of our institution said that our mission is to take over the state responsibility and guarantee this responsibility, and the child protection guardian plays a crucial role in that. But of course, there are other stakeholders. For example, at the time when the child is taken out of the family, or even earlier, so around the time when a child is removed from the family, there are obviously various assessments conducted with various stakeholders who basically take up the role of parents. And maybe one more thing I would like to mention, but maybe we will talk about it more in the future. But I believe that we play a crucial role, and the guardian acts almost as a parent, but there are two more stakeholders that play a crucial role in the life of the child. And one is the biological parent, obviously, that will always remain, and also the foster parents or any sort of person who takes care of the child. So when the child is removed from their family and is placed in this child protection system, all of a sudden they have three parents, so to say, and this is a very important safeguard that we can proud of. But the question is how much these three players, these three parents, can cooperate. That is a huge challenge. And now I'd like to also mention an important issue, namely that, well, the safety of children cannot be considered separately from the safety of parents, especially those who act as parents around the children, be it professional or biological parents. So this is something that we really need to discuss. So we really need to have a look at these two aspects, how they are interlinked. And also, again, just a short thought on participation. I was so pleased that I could see that at the beginning of our conference we had children here, and they had a roundtable discussion, and also at the exhibition just outside in the lobby we can see their drawings and their thoughts. I think that's a very important starting point, and we have to build upon this approach. We must remember that we have to work together with the children in our work, and when we formulate recommendations about the removal of the child, then it is very important to keep this in mind. And actually, one of our legal tasks is to represent the views on the child, But in this new generation service provision, we even have a methodology to do so. And we can clearly see that we cannot make good decisions without them, without listening to their views. And one of the important tasks we have is the placement of the child according to his or her needs. That's an important right of the children. It's a process that has to be conducted in a team. And the planning of this placement is very crucial. And we have a methodology in the framework of which we have several meetings involving the child. And and actually it has only been legal since the introduction of the Act on Child Protection. Anyway, but how could it happen that it wasn't obvious in the past? Well, I'm sorry, I will conclude very soon, but I keep thinking about it that, well, that we need to give more chances to the children, and we must remember how vulnerable they are in this world that is run by adults. And it is so important to give them a chance to sit at the same table where decisions are made on her or his life. And often we disregard this aspect in the regulatory framework. And we must remember that often they can't really raise their voice. So, well, the point I would like to make here, that it is just so easy to not to really put emphasis on a very important right of the child. Oh, I'm so sorry, I could just go on and on for hours. But anyway, I think this is something that we really need to consider. Yeah, it's very tempting to talk about it, but I think that would just guide us in just one direction. But we mustn't forget, when it comes to the Act on the Child Protection, one of the most important aspects is that first and foremost, children should be placed in foster care. And János is representing that institution. So basically an institution that acts as a foster care agency for most children. What do you mean, or what do we mean by placing a child in foster care? Are there any risks? Thank you. Yeah, I would have listened to both Eva and Erzsébet for hours, because obviously this is an endless story. Well, but also we need to remember, and it's worth pointing it out, that the Hungarian child protection service provision system has undergone a huge change, restructuring in the past couple of years. The attitude and the legal approach has changed immensely, and now we try to focus on a very tailor-made service provision to the child. And that, of course, also means that we need to provide foster care. I think some of you remember that when this act was elaborated and was subject to social discussion, we discussed this from several aspects that were quite innovative. But the whole idea is that we have to have a family-like placement of the child. So basically to replace so-called orphanages, children homes, and place children into a more family-like setup. And obviously that would replace their family as much as possible. Of course, a family can be the closest to the biological family rather than an institution. Anyway, so we also need to focus on the families who will then later act as foster care families, which we often tend to forget. So we've also heard that the right to safety is a very important fundamental right of the children. And I would like to also mention at this point that it is a very important aspect of our life. And it's not just about safety, but rather the right to have a healthy emotional development. So this is the context that we want to have when we talk about foster care. So in order to enable healthy development, emotional development, so not generally about socialization, but really from the point of view of being able to bond to someone within a family setting, because it has to be optimal in order to make sure that the children can have a healthier development that wouldn't happen without this family setup. So I think if this bond does happen, even if it takes, if it happens later in the child's life, I think it is vital to have a family. And there are no alternatives to being able to grow up in a family. So we need to provide a right to children to be able to have an optimal and healthy upbringing, and that can only take place in a family. Of course, it's such a complex issue and such a huge challenge. It has loads of advantages, because obviously it provides a better environment for the children to be able to grow up in a healthy way. But of course, there are lots of threats and lots of risks, because sometimes it does not provide a situation where children and foster parents can bond. And of course, it can lead to abuses that take so many forms. For example, also by hindering children to keep contact with their biological parents. So there are lots of taboos. We don't really want to talk about it, but we do need to, because in the past couple of years, obviously, we've undergone a lot of changes, and now we have a very different approach. We have new maintainers in some of the institutions. Anyway, as a result, we have also changed our attitude, and we consciously try to make sure that we will be able to provide the right of children in a more efficient way to have a better relationship with their own biological family. And we prepare them and their families, their biological parents, for returning. And as a result of our activities, we can see the bottlenecks in this process on a daily basis, that even the best foster parents are not good enough if they don't realize that they have to work on themselves when it comes, for example, to bonding, when it comes to facilitating this bond to be established between the child and the biological parents, to promote contact keeping. So if we really want to create an environment where the foster parents are able to support the children and the parents to find each other, to be reunited, that is crucial. So this is a huge issue in our system, and I think all maintainers experience the same challenge. Maybe they don't talk about it, but it's still there. And just again, another issue I'd like to touch upon is that quite recently we finished an important research study together with the Agota Foundation, where we had randomized sampling from the entire population, and we had loads of variables used in this study. But we came to the conclusion, and obviously we are still at the initial phase of finalizing the report. But anyway, what we can clearly see is that the emotional development of the child and the bonding capabilities of the foster parents and the and the issues the foster parents are facing, well, they they represent a huge problem that are interlinked that we need to address. And when it comes to enforcing the rights of the children, this is the issue we need to tackle. So I believe that I think it is our responsibility to be much more aware and mindful and open when it comes to these problems and struggles. You may remember that Eva mentioned that there are, well, let's call it 3 types of parents: the biological parents, the parent type of actor who takes care of the child, and also the guardian. We must remember that 1/3 of the children who are removed from their family are placed in children's home. So then we have to add some more players, for example, various educators, and of course it keeps changing as well. So I believe, let's just be honest, the best case scenario is that there are only 2 parents. But if there are 3, 4, 5 players that act as parents, that doesn't make life easy. And of course, it entails a lot of risks, and that's what the legislator tried to focus on when the child protection guardian as an institution was established, because this is basically a service that is now provided. So, Krisztina, what do you think about the situation of children who are still in children's home, which, let's face it, the majority of them are? Okay, I would like to welcome everyone. As János also mentioned, in the past couple of years, we have undergone lots of changes, the majority of which, luckily enough, were very positive. But of course, there are some disadvantages in this new setup as well. And unfortunately, I have, within my institution, I have to deal with some of them. I do not want to share too much figures with you, because I think we are talking about children, but in 2021, 14,600 claims were submitted to our institution. So it clearly shows, well, it shows 2 things. First of all, that the trust placed in child protection guardianship remains. Of course, in the system, there is a huge turnover. I must mention that in our case, well,
So there is a child protection expert working in the field for 8 to 10 years, because it is very important from the point of view of confidential conversations. It's not a good idea to have a huge fluctuation in these persons. So we really pay close attention to this. And so also the requests that find us is very high. So in the year 2022, we will even probably have more requests. This doesn't mean that this is a trend that there are more and more problems. No, it's rather that there is a higher level of confidence from the children, and also they. We also have different categories concerning the requests. There are individual, legal insults, problems. So if the individual right was violated, that's one case, or if there is a matter that affects a group of children, and then we also have another group which deals with systematic problems. So on a daily basis, these are the issues that we deal with. And I really, it's good to hear that there are so many colleagues providing help to children, and I hope this will be in the future this way too. However, children sometimes do not understand what these people, these helpers want. I want to highlight the right to stating opinion and the right to getting information. Unfortunately, in the case of this letter, very often we see that even if there is a good will concerning the act, from the part of the experts, they just do not inform the children about what is happening or what will happen, what kind of documents they are being handed over, what will the future proceedings be. And this can very often lead to a high level of frustration, or the children just say, okay, well, these experts, these adults do everything anyway without my participation, so I didn't need to be active, and then they will be very passive in the future as adults. So they become just responsive and not active players. At present, we do not really see forums or domains where the children themselves can really express their opinions. We very often said, as child protection experts, that it would be very good if there would be places would be created where children could express what they would need, what their opinions are concerning certain issues. And another matter that we deal with is making aware children of laws. Unfortunately, I left my documents in my car, but I tried to sum up the gist of them. So we actually we started from ourselves. We also have children of our own. So what our aim should be is to make children understand what this whole thing is about. So how can rights be taught to a child between the ages of 5 to 8? So if we just quote acts or laws, this would lead to nothing. I have 3 children, and when they were small, I read to them a Hungarian children's book about little children, and uh, and uh, uh, and there was a colleague who said that there were many. He had many laws, and that somehow children's stories should be created from these. So through children's stories, the rights should be forwarded. It should be communicated to the children. So rights to information, rights to expressing one's opinions. It was very popular, this book that we created along these lines. Even there was a competition of drawings and theater play. In the kindergarten provision, there was a training uh, for the teachers there, because the earlier one is aware of one's rights, the better it is, because one will then know where one's border is. So we have some means and tools to make children aware of the rights. Each of the kindergarten in Hungary received this kind of specific training book, and then also in schools we have disseminated materials to head teachers, and where the teachers talk about such issues with the pupils. So these are tools with the aim of making children aware of their rights. But there are, of course, materials for experts. Policemen, psychologists, and child protection experts were involved in creating these materials, and this is how we try to reach out to children and to everyone involved in child protection. It is an excellent direction, and it's a good discussion because here you could hear concrete examples about how the safety of children can be raised, can be improved. Well, it is very well known that child protection is not an area which is hugely funded, so this is why it's very good to think through what could be done. How do you see it that with not how with rather the change of mindset with the collaboration of colleagues here, so in a sort of in a cost-effective way, uh, how could the safety of children be improved? It was just mentioned that there is a high risk of having too many adults around children with but when this kind of mindset, this kind of approach appeared to me, so that we really support colleagues and we work together. So there is this mindset already present. We already talked about emotional safety, that there should be at least one person of confidence showing empathy towards a child, so that for those children who do not have biological families who would understand them, to them it is of utmost importance to have at least one adult who can be a person of confidence who support them. So this is what we hear from expert colleagues, that there is a feedback from children that those adults who are really there for them, who listen to them, maybe only in the afternoons in the school, it is already enough for them to get emotional safety, emotional security, and so this kind of mindset should be focused on, because I'm sure the safety for children will be there if there are supporting adults for them, and tools, means should be there. I remember that when these books were published that were mentioned, then these were disseminated and distributed in our institutions. Uh, so I think such things are of great help. I absolutely agree. I I believe that forming the right mindset is of utmost importance. However, at present in this sphere, there is a crisis concerning manpower. So it's not about recruiting new colleagues, but somehow retaining those who are already in the system. So this is in itself a challenge. So the direction that we heard is good, but there is still a lot to do. Maybe they should be empowered uh, so that they really remain in the system. That's a huge challenge, definitely. Well, we have lots of creative ideas, and next year, well, of course, but without, we want to even further develop them, but, well, we also would need funding, that's also true. However, concerning making one's aware of one's rights, we do not want, I don't know, concrete messages that come to this training or that training, but to rather develop tools when in childcare homes, when there is a poster, a billboard, for example, the child immediately sees not only about the children's rights, because obligations are there too. I'm a mother, so, but for example, dignity, a term of dignity, which is so important. If each and every day we pass by a billboard stating you have a right to dignity, respect towards one another, right to the free expression of one's opinion. And next year we try to address this issue and hope be able to reach out to the children this way. Yes, training. Even if it has such a pedagogical aspect, these are really key issues. If we want to have this kind of approach when one knows about one's rights, we have to, the basic knowledge should be there so that the experts, the colleagues know about their responsibilities. So just an example, an authentic response concerning keeping contact. Concerning keeping contact, and mainly in institutions, we see that the number of leaving without being allowed to do so is a problem, and keeping contact with the biological families. So if one looks at the family, the conditions, the current status, and so on, and if we saw that it was clear that this situation, the way contact can be held with the family, was not clearly regulated, well, so there was a huge problem concerning leaving the institution without a permit. If we look at a population of 7,000 people, so 13 counties, if you add up the numbers, so we really struggled with the authorities to create a clear situation, but we still have difficulties because it's not easy to to say when the new regulation for keeping contact can be requested. And another matter, just as Eva and Krisztina mentioned, how important is innovation, and how important it is to see even tiny and clear problems that be it the case of legal guardians. I hope there will be a training for them, or the managing authorities, or the colleagues, or child protectors, so that they should be trained adequately.
Mihez van joga, és hogyha a gyermek kötelességeiről van.
So we need to consider what rights the child have and how we can enforce it and how we can contribute to its socialization and so on. So we need to provide training on that and raise awareness. And unfortunately, often we are lagging behind with these kind of activities. And also the turnover is an issue. We keep talking about it. So it is very important to think about this, and we need to take steps and setting up an atmosphere and also an approach. But the whole society where these kind of professions are much more respected. So we need to restore the reputation of this profession. We need to restore a culture where it is a prestigious thing to take responsibility for other people. And I think it would be very important. And as part of it, the professionals need to be aware of the rights of the children. They need to know how to teach the children to exercise their rights and to be aware of their rights and how we handle this situation from the employer point of view. And when I was listening to Krisztina, I almost took some notes down to me. Namely the labor code, because we need to also consider labor code aspects in our work. Because, well, obviously we can expect in the case of an employee that to perform his or her activities in a way that, for example, in our context, that he would be aware of the various rights children have. I mean, that could be a minimum requirement. But as an employee, where are the responsibilities? How can we expect them to be aware of these rights? And often, the reason for this high turnover or fluctuation in our profession is partly the fact that they don't know what they commit themselves to. So they don't know that, for example, that they will need to work in a situation when they need to be aware of various legal aspects of their activities. They need to know what comes after which procedural steps. And of course, with their attitude, sometimes it just doesn't work. So again, that requires training, that requires attitude forming. So this is such an important profession. So often I tell my children, it's not an after-school club. You need to take this more seriously than that. So again, so when it comes to the context of kind of labor law, well, it's very much in compliance with what you said. Unfortunately, I can see the clock clicking there, so I know that we run out of time, and therefore I really just want to reflect upon what has been said just briefly. So what I started with was the huge role the state is playing in this whole story, and I completely agree with what my colleagues have just said. However, I believe that if we are unable to change a situation where in our children's home there are sufficient number of employees who can actually perform the work. If we are not there yet, it's very difficult to actually improve our situations. Everything you've just mentioned, they are legitimate ideas. However, with the payment we are able to give to these people, considering especially the fact how difficult this job is, with not too much success stories, lots of failures and lots of difficulties, and also the way it is portrayed in media. What you see is that anyone working in the child protection system, well, there are lots of difficulties. So anyway, so this situation needs to be improved in order to be able to meet these expectations you listed. Thank you very much. Thank you for warning me about the time. And I did try to have a look, but unfortunately I wasn't able to. I do apologize that we couldn't make it a bit shorter. I'm so sure that the colleagues who are participating in this discussion have so many ideas about financing, about technical issues, what would need to be changed urgently or maybe less urgently in order to make sure that these children will be in safety or in a greater level of safety. And of course, it cannot be functioning for free. We need to first of all establish the infrastructure and financial framework. But please do encourage us that there are some ways forward, and maybe there are some things that we could implement with less cost. Maybe attitude forming doesn't require that much additional budget. And it is important to remember that for the safety of these children, we need to look forward to